What is up, everybody? I hope you enjoyed that new intro. For those of you that have no idea who the guy with the podcaster shirt is, you've probably seen me at a couple of different moments at the end of streams. My name is Jan Almasy. I'm the owner of Apex Communications Network, who has been lucky enough to be working with this crazy crew since about March. But the guy to my right, if I'm looking at
Yep.
it to my right, is Mr. Jacob Glanville, Dr. Jacob Glanville, the founder of Cenevax. And you guys probably already know who that is, whether you recognize him or his curly-headed hamster counterpart. Jake, welcome to another episode for a live stream to the audience.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I love the new intro.
Yeah, so we actually have somebody sitting in the broadcast studio with us today that I'm super excited to have on, but I figured I would let you manage that introduction.
Yeah, so I'm super stoked to have him on as well. It's my brother, Keith Glanville, and we've been meaning to have him on for a while because he was super critical in the early period of us building up our vaccine program that we ended up basically wanting to prove out in humans, and we ended up finding a way to run those studies in Guatemala with the University of San Carlos, but we literally built the facility. And by we, I mean it was Keith. And that went from, literally shoveling pig shit in Guatemala and running experiments to meeting Bill Gates, getting funded, and now running these studies with some of the most premier research institutions on the planet. So I kind of just wanted to bring him in, partially for that, partially just because Keith is super entertaining. So I figured everyone could use some, positive news for a change instead of the grind of 2020. So, hey Keith, how's it going?
What's up, man?
Doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Not too shabby. I feel like I'm a little bit more peppy. I'm awake because it's now 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. So I've had a little bit more time to kind of wake up and get my stuff moving. But
13 lattes, yeah, good to go.
Where are you located, Keith?
I'm in Los Angeles right now, but I'm actually going to be visiting the Bay Area later today or tomorrow to see Jake, my niece, and, some friends and family up there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to just dive right into where you guys grew up and talk a little bit about what that was like and some adventures that you went on. Now, before I do interviews, I always ask people to give me, questions that lead to amazing stories. And one of the things that you guys chose was canoes and going out and seeking adventure. So why don't we just start where both of you guys were raised, and then we can kind of lead into that story to get things moving.
Jake, do you want to take this?
Sure. I mean, yeah, basically, we grew up in a Mayan village, Zutuil Mayan village on Lake Atitlán in Guatemala, and it was during a civil war. We had a couple friends who were expats, a bunch of folks that were Mayan, some Latins. It was a very different type of community, and also just kind of a crazy location, beautiful, but also pretty, dangerous. And Keith, you're the one who came up with the fond memory of the canoe escapes. You want to roll with that one?
Sure, yeah. So Jan asked us a couple, to kind of like think of some, memories that sort of remind us of home or, set the stage for kind of, what ended up happening with the Cenevax program later. And yeah, just right away it popped into my mind that a fond memory was, Jake waking me up, mom and dad are asleep, let's go. And, most kids slip out of the house through like a window or something and go steal a car or something like that. I mean, not steal a car, but I mean, take their car, take their friends.
I didn't mean that escalated fast. Wow.
You know what I mean? But anyways, but no, we just like walk out of the house, go down to the lake because we grew up right on a lake. There's 3 volcanoes around it. We're in the base of one of the volcanoes, and it's a big caldera lake. And we'd hop in the canoe like a couple of, pirates ready to go in search of adventure, and canoe a couple of miles around the island to our friend Lonnie and Leta's house and wake them up and end up, playing board games, watching movies, reading Fabulous Furry, Freak Brother comics, stuff like that until, it was almost light out, and then we'd canoe home and sneak back in, usually before my dad was up, but sometimes he'd catch us and be like, you boys.
I was going to say, I heard usually. So does that mean that there were periods of time where you got the talkings too?
Well, I mean,
every once in a while, yeah, they woke. Yeah, there's a couple times where because we would like stuff our pillows to like create like a fake Keith and Jake in our beds, and my mom was like not well pleased to find the doppelganger one time in the middle of the night because she had like a bad dream and she wanted to check. She's like, "Oh, what a horrible dream! Well, let me check on my poor boys." And then lifts it up. She's like, "Ah!"
They're not here. All the worst dreams are coming true.
Yeah, and she has a thing
hoodwinked.
She has a thing with dreams too.
I was like, why did Lonnie? So we used to a lot of times we go canoe over to our friends, Lonnie and Letta. So Shalani and Violetta. Why did they never come to us? Why was it always us going to see them?
Because we're more motivated. Ultimately.
Yeah, that was totally it. They would be like, "Yeah, come on over, guys." And they'd always be asleep when we showed up. And we're like, "Guys, we told you we were going to sneak out and come visit you." But then they'd get up. But
yeah, Lonnie was always a champ. He'd like just open his eyes and look at us like he wasn't even surprised, and he'd be like, "You guys want popcorn?"
Like I just so for context, what age was this at?
I would be like 10. Jake would be like 13, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think maybe even a little earlier we started doing it. But yeah, we kind of because the town it was just easier to go by canoe around the whole town. It was like really beautiful and it was just kind of chill to get over there because they're also on a lakefront. Whereas if you go down,
Well, I was gonna say in the packs of wild dogs, dude. Remember, like if we walk through town in the middle of the night, there's like feral dogs that run the streets, and this is a village that, having been occupied by the military for 20 whatever years until the massacre in 1991, right, Jake? People went in and locked their doors at sundown, right? So even after the military, the war ended in 96, the peace accords were signed, and after that, slowly but surely, a nightlife began to develop. But even today, it's still a community. You know, old habits die hard. People mostly go inside at sundown or not long after and kind of close their doors, and the town is like dead in the middle of the night. I mean, dead. You don't see anything except for packs of crazy wild dogs that, you know, they used to like chase us. And, you know, anyways, pretty quickly we figured out that being pirates was much better.
Keith, I'm picturing like when you see people like pet dogs here that they don't know in the States, do you still cringe? Because I can never get used to it. Because like in Guatemala, you definitely do not pet a dog you don't know because it will bite your ass.
Yeah.
I'm picturing like in my head, I'm picturing Aladdin like jumping from house to house, avoiding packs of dogs, like getting chased by dudes with scimitars and just like going at it. And then you're like, man, you know, rather than jumping rooftop to rooftop, we should just get in a canoe and then we'll be good to go.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it had devolved to the point where we were carrying like mace and stuff because we were tired of getting chomped. I mean, one time, because like, you know, you can mace a dog that's about to attack you and it'll react pretty much how a bear does to bear spray. It's like, oh, I don't want that in my eyes and nose, and it'll piss off. And I mean, one time when I was younger than that, and this was during the day, we were walking home from the boat docks because we took a ferry across the lake to school every day and home every day in the afternoon. And I kind of slipped a little bit behind my brother and our friends, and we were walking back to my parents' place, and 3 dogs got on me out of the blue. And I mean, usually they start growling and barking at you. They'll come out of like alleyways and stuff. And usually you like reach for a rock, and they just know that movement and they kind of back off. But these ones weren't having it. And I think I was 7, Jake, at the time, or maybe 8. But 3 of them got on me. I ran into a store, like a little corner store, thinking, okay, I'll go around adults. They'll, you know, I was just going in fight or flight mode. And instead, they were like laughing and watching these 3 dogs. I'm not going to say maul because look how beautiful I am, right? I mean, obviously I survived the encounter, but I was like cowering in the corner. I did get bit in like the hands and the face a couple times, stuff like that. Jake came out of nowhere. I mean, mind you, he's like 10 or 11 or maybe 12. I don't know. And he's got a rock the size of a softball, and he just goes to town on these dogs and saves my ass. So thanks again, Jake.
Hey.
Talk about we would hold rocks. That was our thing. We'd like hold the rock because like when you're little, the dogs aren't scared of you. Like now when we're in town, they run away. But like when we're little kids, there would be like a pack of 6 semi-feral dogs that would come after you. And we'd hold your hands up with rocks in it, and I would kind of tell them, hey, I'm armed, and they'd back off. But I remember Jesse had he had an alternative strategy where we used to be able to sneak out to bars and clubs like very young. Like in Guatemala, we could be like 12 in a club and they don't care. But like on the way back, that's when the dogs will get you. And so Jesse's tactic was like basically to recruit mercenaries. So rather than like hold the rocks up in the air, he would just go and like give some snacks to one dog, and then that dog would act as his like little defender against the other dog. So I always thought that was pretty clever.
It would totally work too. Yeah. You're right. He'd like go get super tacos, which is like the go-to drunchy food in Guat. Like there are these taco stands that are open until whatever, right after the bars close, and they're amazing. They taste so good. They're so greasy and totally will give you a gut bomb sometimes. But anyways, Jesse would he'd like save a little bit of the shredded pork, and like, you know, you get to certain areas where you knew there was like a crazy little pack of dogs that would come out, and Jesse would just start hucking like wads of like pork meat at them. And before you knew it, he had his little band of followers, and you know, yeah, no biggie.
That's super smart. I mean, coming from somebody that like, my mom was born and raised in Slovakia, and like, I mean, 70-person village, right? And then she immigrated here in '93. But I know going back there, having like the local animals and stuff like that on your side, like you just know that there's that dog. Because we have gypsies in Slovakia, and we just call them Tsigani. Right. And they live in like a little area, but you have this, you know, puppy or this feral dog that's running around inside of where the Tsigani live. And then you know that if you don't want that dog to mess with you at the bus stop, you just have to bring we used to call it the tax, like your peace offering in the morning. And then you just kind of chuck, you know, the last little bit of the eggs from your breakfast or a piece of salami that you had. And then you can sit at the bus stop in peace. But he would like just sit there and chill and like, oh, I'm not going to mess with them. He gave me a piece of salami.
Right.
It works out perfect. I really want to talk about like that. You guys specifically as brothers, you know, I've interacted with Jake a ton. I know that he's an adventurous off the wall guy. And Keith, I kind of want you to speak to this too, but seeking adventure and living outside of the box, you know, if you guys had to point to an influence in your life that kind of inspired that passion for innovation, could you point to one specifically that you guys both share?
Jake?
Keith, you want to take this one?
Well, I think it goes back to our grandparents on both sides of the family in a lot of ways. All four of our grandparents were pretty adventurous for their time. I mean, you know, both of our grandfathers served in World War II. My dad's dad passed away when he was just a baby from complications from a wound that he had received as a Marine in the South Pacific. My mom's dad, you know, he quit college to serve as a young lieutenant in Europe during the invasion, and that sort of inspired him to. Well, he ended up going on to have a pretty incredible career in with NASA, Rocketdyne. You know, he was part of although he just passed away in April, late April, early May. But he was 97, and you know, anyways, he lived an incredible life. I mean, he was his team designed the main propulsion system for the Saturn V rocket, and he just got to do a lot of incredible things in his life. But also our parents, like my dad's mom, Bonnie, she went down to live in Guatemala in the 70s by herself, being a relatively young widow. My mom was 19 when she left here and bought an old beat up van with her hippie artist friends and drove it to Guatemala in the 70s through Mexico, having never been there before. And same story with my dad. He met my mom down there through his mom while he was sort of starting to piece together this idea of starting a bed and breakfast down there. So our family, I guess you could say, has always been sort of you know, it's just because someone says you can't do something, or just because everyone thinks that something's too dangerous or too unpredictable to do. I mean, who's to say what's too unpredictable or too dangerous to each and individual person, right? I mean, challenges are fun.
Yeah. I also like. So first off, Keith, you mentioned that right behind you is the scaled down model of that Saturn V rocket, right?
Yeah, I'll grab it.
Nice. So I think for me also, there's some advantages of growing up in like, we're growing up in a civil war. It was, semi-broken state. There weren't basic services. And I think there's an advantage to that. Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, that is way bigger than I was expecting it to be. Wow.
Last time I found it.
That was some Mary Poppins shit, man. Nice one.
Yeah, that's the the D5 or whatever, the primary propulsion system for the Apollo missions. 1.5 million pounds of thrust, and there were 5 of them at the first stage, so 7.5 million pounds of thrust, which would drop off, and then there would be 3 of them for 5 million pounds of thrust, and then the third stage was a different type of rocket, I believe.
Wow. I mean, just
I don't know. I thought it would be like this big for some reason.
yeah, I'm trying to process, like, people talk about inspiration. And one of the big things that I really try to focus on when I'm doing any type of speeches or any types of addresses is creating a legacy that your grandchildren will listen to the chronicles of your life as a bedtime story. Now, when I first heard about the different stories, like when he passed away and I watched Jake post about these stories and the inspiration and the drive and, the passing of the torch when it came to the responsibility to innovate and solve problems, I really felt like a super, super deep connection to that mentality. Now, as brothers kind of growing up, have you always had the dynamic of like that creative problem solving, almost like too smart for your own good type of thing, where you're figuring things out that people don't necessarily want you to be able to figure out?
Yeah, I think we always have. Like our parents are like that too. Like my dad is really good at a practical problem solver. Our mother is super creative. And I think also, like I said, we grew up in a broken state. So there's always some shit breaking down and you need to come up with innovative solutions. And I think one of the nice things about it is that when everything works, like when society's functioning too well, I think it traps the minds of people to think that that's the only way it can be because everything is working. I think you need to see the cracks in the systems around you to realize that this shit was just made by people. Everything has flaws, and therefore you can imagine something better than what lies before you, which is the advantage of such a scenario.
Right. A lot of times people, the whole old adage, don't fix it if it's not broken, right? So, pick a problem or not even a problem or just a way of doing things. Someone figured out a way to do it and it worked well enough. So why fix it, right? But when you're put into a situation where you have to come up with a new solution, that kind of opens up your eyes to, wow, maybe I've been doing a lot of things, not necessarily wrong, but just kind of become complacent to the ease of, oh, this is just the way it's done. This is how you're supposed to tie your shoes. I mean, that's a weird example, but you get what I'm saying. I think Jake, I had it easy. Jake was a very gifted child from a young age, and he's my older brother, obviously, but everyone puts such a huge focus on him, poor guy. Like, Jake, go cure cancer. He's all, I'm 8, dude. Come on. So like I didn't have that kind of attention to, or that kind of pressure to kind of perform on that level constantly. I mean, he was winning chess tournaments against adult players when he was 8. So like I said, it just I mean, I'd like to think I'm a relatively intelligent guy, but obviously Jake had a lot of I feel like, he had a lot of pressure, right, Jake, growing up constantly. I mean, in the end it was a good thing because he to push yourself, but
yeah, I definitely felt it. I kind of, pressure I don't like, but I liked problem solving. I always thought that was fun. And I think, I don't know, I feel like you and I were always the ones when like we go over, there was some sort of issue, like we're kind of like men of action, so we're always like, okay, well, we can solve it by doing this and this and this and this, and come up with solutions. I think our friends would often, or I don't know, we go to our friends' houses and like hear problems and try to. There's always a problem in Guatemala. Maybe that's true everywhere, but certainly in Guatemala, there's always like water's not working, or there's some problem in town, or like, maybe you're solving it by it's like, rerouting someone's irrigation system, or going in and being like, well, let's just talk to these 3 people and sort this out. But, or, Keith and I were the bouncers, so someone's problem solving was literally grabbing someone and kicking them out of the restaurant. But
that has happened.
Here I'm super echoey, so I'm gonna bring a blanket in here. It's an empty room because I just moved, and so I think it's creating a bunch of echo. So I'm gonna grab a blanket to see if it'll soften the noise a little bit.
That works. So Keith, I'm curious because I didn't realize that you were the younger brother, right?
I am, yeah.
And so me and my younger brother work a lot together, right? And that dynamic has always been, he feels bad for the pressure that I have, But then I also am like, oh, well, you know, you've lived your entire life with mom and dad being like, see what he's doing. Like, try to, you know, do that. Or don't do that, because I was the kind of kid that, you know, 17, 18 years old, I'm looking at sitting on the side of the highway because a cop pulled me over at 2 o'clock in the morning after a party type of thing. And my parents are like, don't do that. That's not a good thing. As the younger brother, like when Jake, you know, kind of started having this like plan for Cenevax and starting everything in Guatemala, what was it like having him pull you in, you know, as the younger brother and being like, hey, man, I'm out of my element here. I need your help. Can you come in and, you know, join me on this journey?
Yeah. So I have a little bit of you and me too. My Jake wasn't getting in trouble as much as I was for a lot of years. He was, you know, he's had his moments, but for the most part, he was pretty focused on what he wanted and knew what he wanted, you know. So yeah, I was really honored, you know. Jake contacted me, and I have been working. I work in the trades. I've been doing landscape and construction. You know, I'm a builder. I like to create things for years and years. And I had quit my job finally. I had been was either about to get married or had been married for a short time. But I quit my job and started my own company doing remodeling and stuff like that. And you know, as all companies are, they're usually slow when you first start out. And Jake just happened to contact me, and he was like, hey, you know, how are things going? I was like, well, I quit my job and started my own company. It's a little slow, but it's good. It's nice to have freedom. And he's like, well, I kind of need your help. And he sort of laid out the plan for me, which was, you know, he had compiled all this data and all this stuff while he was at Stanford doing his PhD. And he was ready to start the phases of a, you know, kind of his dream that he'd been working on for a long time of an all-around, an all-encompassing influenza vaccine, and he wanted to start pig trials. He'd done a bunch of other trials with rats and stuff like that. You know, there's a hierarchy of animals you work through before humans. I'm sure you know that. So I was like, well, what do you need out of me, dude? I'm like, you know that I have no background in science. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, I need you to build a a housing facility that's suitable for test animals. You know, obviously they're allotted a lot more room and better conditions and stuff, of course, than like a farm. You know, for just using the animals for food, and that just kind of grew from there. I started drawing up blueprints. I flew down there, saw the piece of property we're going to use, and I recruited a team of builders, guys that were. Well, yeah, team of builders. I drew up blueprints, got in contact with the city because this piece of property had no water or electricity running to it at the time. It was just a rock quarry in the middle of a coffee field, basically. So we had to clear a lot of stuff. And then that just sort of kept growing from there. I mean, every trip I would go down, my friend Jose Miguel, who's a psychologist in Antigua, I talked to him, and he had a friend who was a vet. We needed to hire a vet. So I ended up meeting with her, Korean Rays, and we just got lucky, man. She did her veterinary thesis on pigs and on, vector diseases through pigs to humans. So we really,
yeah.
She's an amazing person, just super nice and really, really a hard worker and smart. So I really got lucky with her. And, you know, in the beginning, it was mostly me going down there with a lot of just sort of the logistics building. I had to do a lot of research on my own just to understand what was going to be involved, what the pigs needed, you know, from a number of angles, even psychologically. Like, you know, we provided them with, you know, ways to entertain themselves, as apparently it does, you know, their mental health is reflected by their physical health when they're, you know, pigs are really smart and they like to do things like play with, you know, balls and stuff.
They're annoyingly smart. Pigs are like, I raised hogs because I was in 4-H and FFA all the way through high school, and like it grew up on a farm and everything. Pigs are probably one of the most underestimated animals when it comes to intellect. Like, we had to double and triple lock those doors with latches on one side and the other side. Like, have to put in special feeding systems because they'd figure out how to open the automatic ones and then just gorge themselves. Like, they're so annoyingly smart that you have to put in so many like safe stop systems to keep them contained. And like people don't think about it. They're just like, oh, it's a pig. I'm like, no, like that's a pig, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I got a video that I will send you after this because I have no idea how to like throw it up in the background or whatever. But I call it the Alcatraz video. It's the first batch of piglets after I made contact with a company that could provide us with pigs that of a certain age that they could guarantee of a certain health level, and I brought them, I brought them back to the facility. I had these custom made iron gates and closed the pigs in, and we realized they were going to be small enough to be able to get in between the bars if they like wiggled enough and whatnot. So I went in and totally put chicken wire in there, and I'm not talking about just like laying it around it. Like I fastened it properly. I'm a builder. I knew what I'm doing, right? And what do? I come in there, and all the piglets are in the other corner of the facility, just looking at me like, "What?" So, Gabe, anything?
So I think we started. Was it fall of 2014 or it was like spring of 2015? Because I remember we had the first. I called you up because I was like, "Look, I need to do this research in pigs." And there's a market for flu shots for pigs. It's the right animal. And then I'd been talking to the University of San Carlos, but like they didn't have facilities. That was the thing, right? We could collaborate with them, but we needed our own facilities. And I remember that we had this meeting, and I have a photo of when you literally drew out. I described what we needed. You kind of like drew out the like pig PubMed of like the layout for the whole thing, which is basically like exactly what was eventually built. When was that?
I think it was late 2014. That does sound right to me. We were in the Hilton or something like that in Guat City. No, anyway, it doesn't matter. We were in a hotel. We met with associate professor.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Was that place, right? It's the one in zone 10, like right around the corner. It's across from it doesn't matter, whatever. It's a hotel. I remember we had the meeting. It was like Professor Erwin, and then you got us connected up with Karina because we were looking around for a vet, and there was a guy from Pana, and you were like, I don't know, I'm like not 100% sure if he's the right guy. And then you contacted Karina, and initially you're like, I'm a little worried. She asked a shitload of questions, and we're like, oh, no, that's actually good. And so she came in, and because she was the one who gave us like, you need to have these many dimensions for the animals, anticipating they're going to grow, which is why you built that second facility up above.
Yeah, I'd done a lot of research on my own. Well, a lot. Okay, I'd done some research on my own. Like I said, I have no background in animal husbandry nor in the vaccine industry, but I basically, I did research on what was standard square footage for a pig, and obviously in farming facilities, it's atrocious. Even in medical research facilities in other countries other than like Canada, the US, a handful of other places, is pretty atrocious still. So I just want to play it safe, and I doubled what was the standard for, I believe, the US. I wanted to make sure they had tons of room. And then Karina did correct that eventually. She's like, well, you got to remember these pigs are going to get to, she asked, she's like, how long do you plan on running these trials for? And they did end up getting huge. I mean, I'd have 2 margaritas and I'd want to ride one. Like, woo, let's go. On that note, Jake, you want to talk about tripod for a minute?
Yeah. So we had like, when we run these studies, you pick the number of groups you have that are going to get different treatments. Like one group gets the vaccine, certain vaccine. One group gets like a sham vaccine, so it's just saline. Another group gets a different, we're trying different concentrations. And when you want to make sure in science, you want to make sure that your groups have like equivalent pigs, so that you don't want to put all your big fat pigs in one group, because if you see a difference, how do you know it's because you just didn't have all the big guys in one group versus the medicine worked? And so I had a method to randomize the pigs, and what you always do is you get an extra pig or a couple extra pigs. Just that way, you try to find, you have like a simple algorithm that randomizes the pigs in the groups, and then there's always like an odd one out that it turns out if you remove one pig, the rest of the groups can be more even. Which turned out the obvious result of the algorithm is it kicked this one pig out, and so we go over and look at it, and of course that pig was it was a little bit smaller than the rest of them, because I think one of its little arms didn't quite work as well as the other one. So we actually called it tripod because it kind of would like walk around a little bit, three legs, sort of like a little pimp walk. But because it wasn't formally in the study, it was basically like our pet, and it was really cute. I don't know. I thought it was like one of the smartest ones, and we could give it like treats outside of the standard food that all the other pigs were having. So it kind of would run up and snuggle up on us and stuff. It was a cute little devil.
So I actually have a little picture here that I'll bring up of you guys since we were talking about it. But there's a guy's picture from childhood, and we'll go ahead and unmute Keith here. Boop. And then I have one other one that I want to show the audience here that I think is really cool. Because I think that it really shows into like the way that you guys are as brothers, you know, just out there being adventurous.
Nice.
I can't see them, but I'm guessing that
it's the one with us in a tree.
Oh yeah,
with little kids. Yeah.
Where I've got the rocking little part in my do.
That's the one. Yeah.
Nice.
My hair make it super fluffy.
Jake was always climbing stuff. I mean, and shoes. Who needs shoes, right?
Yeah, I was not a fan of shoes.
Yeah, that was a weird little adjustment period when you came to America and you're like, what? They want me to wear shoes.
I was like fully feral when I got up to the States for my last year of high school, and I got like airdropped into like the suburbs of Los Angeles, and I showed up at the high school, and I think it took me a while to figure out like what was really pissing people off the most about my whole like jungle skis. Like it was my huge hair, my like all my like jungle jewels, or like super open shirt that was like halfway unbuttoned. Or I was like, I think it's the shoes is actually making people the most angry. I kept taking my shoes off, and they're like, so yeah, I would say there was an adjustment phase.
Or the casual splits at any time. Jake's made a flexible, lots of yoga, lots of martial arts. So he just like casually be like doing the splits or like grab his foot, just lift it straight up in the air. And people would be like looking at him like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, like why is he doing this?
I feel like you acclimated a little better than I did. Was it because you're a cinephile, right? You watched a shitload of movies. Like, was that why, or just natural charm? Like, what was it? I feel like you kind of like airdropped in and people loved you.
I love your book confidence there. I think you had embraced the like Guatemalan like expat thing more than me. I think also when both of us went to a boarding school in Guatemala City. Like it wasn't a boarding school, but they did board students because we lived too far away to be able to commute for high school, and it was a real international crowd and stuff. And I think when Jake was there, there was less of a scene of like American kids his age, is what I'm guessing. Because like remember Jake, I had like Thor and Dane and Daniel and like all those clowns, like, and so they had fairly recently moved down from the States to Guatemala. Like Dane's dad was a field commander for the DEA, and Thor's dad was a helicopter operator for the DEA, and a lot of DEA. I just realized, huh?
I'm like, oh my god! Like you're just like got all the inside the stories that you must have heard that you're not supposed to talk about have got to be.
Yeah. Sergio was a beast of a man. Let's just say he was huge.
Yeah, I'm picturing like my grandpa's friends from the war and stuff. Just like what they say goes, and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna go do that now.
There's a lot of crazy expats in Guatemala. Like Keith, you were talking about Mercenary Larry or like Chuck. There's some rowdy. There's reasons why people end up.
Did you say Mercenary Larry? Like that's a
let's tell the next story of Mercenary Larry.
Yeah, like we cannot skip over that now that that's been brought up to the table because that is an interesting name. Before we dive back into Cenevax, we have to talk about that.
Yeah, Mercenary Larry was like he had kind of a heart of gold, but he was also like a highly troubled individual. I mean, like I don't know if I could describe him in one sentence. It's that he had a motorcycle, and you went out and we were like trying to figure out what's going on with his motorcycle, and we realized that he'd soldered a little blowtorch on the handlebars of his motorcycle so that he could like smoke crack while he was driving it. Like that's the kind of character you have to deal with in Guatemala.
Oh my lord!
Yeah, he was a decorated Army Ranger sniper in Vietnam, and then when he got out of the war, he went like a lot of vets from that war, unfortunately, I think got into drugs. This is all, way before we were born, way before we ever met him. We didn't find this out till we were adults. But he went to where the money was and where the drugs were. So he went and started freelancing for the cartels in Colombia during the 80s. And, Larry was a character, man. Unfortunately, he did meet, his end. He lived fast. He went fast. He lived a hard life, and he was found murdered a few years ago in Guatemala City. So, don't do drugs, kids.
Yeah, these are the stories that I think are so valuable to the audience, though, knowing, the background of where some of these people that they're constantly seeing, talking about innovation, talking about this other stuff coming from, that, that we're coming from a human background. That we had, characters that we met in our childhood that are like, oh, I should be like this or I shouldn't be like this. And, the interesting dynamic between a heart of gold and a blowtorch on a motorcycle.
Jake is right. Larry I remember him as, he was always super polite, super nice guy, had kind of a sense of chivalry, if you will. And I know it sounds crazy, but like if a lady or woman or girl was, threatened or made to feel uncomfortable around him, he would straighten that person, the person threatening them out right away.
Yep.
So yeah, he did have that,
well, being a decorated Army Ranger, like that never really goes away, I don't think. Regardless of how far off path some of the life may take you, that's one thing I've always noticed about vets, even that I've taken care of in the hospital. They could be fully in a psychosis and everything like that, but a lot of times if you like bear down on some of that military discipline, they snap like right back out of it. And that's the one thing that they can remember through all of the Alzheimer's is just, I got to, hold it together and have my manners about me at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's, and my uncle that I'm living with right now actually was also a Ranger in Vietnam, 3 tours, did a lot of crazy stuff. And, it's been great living with him this past year and change. Just finally get closer to him. I always knew him. Of course, he married my mom's sister. But I feel like we never really got to hang until more recently, and we've had a really good chance to bond. He's talked a lot about his experience during the war and his experience coming home and everything. And
yeah. Now, as you and Jake were going on this journey and building Cenevax down in Guatemala, like the testing site and everything like that, that's also another perfect opportunity for 2 people to bond, in a completely different way than being kids trying to sneak into canoes. So, as you're building that stuff up and it's starting to take more shape, and, Jake, you're seeing this vision that Keith put down on paper turning into reality. Why don't we talk about as the project was starting to get to the point where, at some point Netflix reaches out and wants to start covering this, or the documentary is formed. What was that period of time like as the project started gaining some traction?
So I will say, like, the coolest part of this whole, because part of the reason I reached out to my brother was I was like, I kind of get like a fire under my ass under a certain cool idea, but there was this problem of like, I need to run these studies. It's going to take me too long to go talk to academics or, anywhere else. It's going to take years to get the money. I could work with the University of San Carlos, but we need a facility. And I had enough resources from my company to be able to fund it. But I couldn't be in 2 places at once. I was like doing a company and doing a PhD at the same time. That was already too much. And Keith was like the only person who I could trust and like who first off, who understands how to do business in Guatemala, had all the right skills. And like, I knew he could like handle like anything. And like one example, I remember, so you go down there and you basically you get the facility, brought in everyone as like a foreman to go build the facility, but you're also sourcing our vet, and you also are like setting up like the paperwork and agreements with, and also you found the Apogua is the group that does, they call it genetic pork, I think. It's like a strain of pig that's like super high quality for these sorts of studies. But I remember you had to do like one example, he had to go out there and they're in the middle of fuck all nowhere, and he goes out with a truck to go pick up our animals, and like in Guatemala, everybody loves paperwork. Go ahead.
3 trucks.
3 trucks, yeah. And like, well, okay, I don't know, it's your story, man. But I remember, like, he ends up having to like go in there, like, oh, I'm sorry, there's one extra piece of paperwork you don't have, so we can't give you the pigs. And he's like, I'm not leaving till I get these goddamn pigs. And so he climbs up a hill to get enough reception because it's like in the middle of nowhere in the jungle. It's a very hilly country. to get enough reception to go back and prove to them that the money is in the bank account, so they will release the animal. I was like, yes, like, because anybody, so many other people would have come back empty-handed, but Keith was just like, I'm not leaving without those fucking pigs.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna climb a mountain so that I can make sure that those pigs coming back with me.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I was sitting there just sweating bullets. We didn't like forget Google Maps. Like Google Maps did work is the crazy part, but it wasn't like, it was just roads with no names, like cutting through the jungle. And I'm all, okay, looking at my maps. I'm actually really surprised that it worked. I'm out there in the jungle. We're driving around. It's sweating. I'm sweating. There's bugs all over me. I got 3 pickup trucks and a convoy behind me, dirt roads. And I'm like, and the driver was kept going like, well, it's probably not around here. So why don't we just go back?
That increases the vote of confidence. I'm picturing like Fortunate Son playing in the background and like a troop like march walking behind you, and you're just Forrest Gumping it. Like, I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah, I was like, are you kidding me, dude? We just drove 3 hours to get here. I'm gonna need to go to a chiropractor now because I'm all jumping around like Ace Ventura, you know. And I'm like, dude, we're here. And he's like, no, you know, we should just turn around. I was like, oh my God, dude. I was like, no, just keep driving. And so I'd hop out of the car about every kilometer and like find someone like in their cane field or whatever, like hacking on something, to be like, you know, and I'm sitting there and, you know, I speak Spanish fluently, but some of these folks only spoke like Quiche, which is not the Mayan language spoken in the area where we grew up. And I speak a very small amount of that. But anyways, there'd be like a language barrier even there sometimes. But I'd be like, dude, like, where are the pigs? And eventually this farmer was like, yeah, just keep going. Take a left at the dirt road, you know, or the other dirt road. Anyways. So eventually we roll up there and there's just a guy in like an armored booth with bulletproof windows, this big iron gate with a pump shotgun and a bulletproof vest and a bandolier with extra shotgun shells. And he's just standing there like, who are you, dude? You know, I pop out of the car with some aviators, just sweating like a priest in a whorehouse. And I'm like, dude, do you have water? Like, you know, we've been going forever anyway. So yeah, like the interaction happened. Jake said the guy didn't want to let me in. I was like, I'm not armed. Does anyone look like we're here to? I'm like, well, how much money you guys pull in with these pigs? Do you think I'm showing up with 3 cars to pull a heist on you? Like, what's going on? So eventually, I got to talk to the director of the place, or you know, the manager, or whatever. He came out, and I was like, I've been in email and phone contact with you every day for like 2 months now. How do you not know who I am? You know, we've talked on the phone before. And he's like, oh yeah, huh. Like, he totally didn't think I was like a person that was actually going to show up, even though I made arrangements to buy X amount of pigs over X amount of months, all this stuff. Pretty hilarious. Then, yeah, they didn't believe that I had the money or whatever. I wrote them a check. I just opened an account for Sinovacs in Guatemala in a bank there. And and so, yeah, Jake's right. I said, F this. I am not going back empty-handed. We're not doing this drive again. And, you know, until we have to get back in. So, yeah, I hiked up in the middle of nowhere, finally got reception, and was able to do a wire transfer and take a screenshot of it.
Yeah, that I probably wouldn't want to do that drive either, but most definitely. And what I'm thinking right now is it was probably the aviators, man. Like, I'm thinking about that whole situation, like you walking out, you know, flicking sweat off of your brow, throwing them on, and this guy's like, yeah, who's this dude coming up here? Trying to be all charismatic.
Right.
He's got I did not see that one coming. Right, you need to wear those the rest of the interview.
Now. I need some pigs, guy.
Yeah. So you got the pigs after climbing a mountain and initiating a wire transfer, and you get them back to the facility. At that point, Jake, like, what happened once the pigs were there and you knew that he had like succeeded on that mission and stuff? What are some of the big like milestones that you guys kind of started hitting as that started to play out?
Yeah, so we had a couple rounds of milestones. So I mean, first we brought in a smaller set of pigs they were like our pilot pigs, and they were basically just to make sure that, like, because we didn't have like, you know, pig husbandry experience like Keith was saying, so we wanted to make sure that, like, you know, nobody's tried to like kidnap our pigs because they're edible and we live in a village where people might want to go eat them, that they couldn't escape, that we could keep them healthy and keep them fed. We also wanted to go, you know, make sure that like the vet could monitor pigs for a while. We wanted to convince ourselves the place was like pig friendly. So we went through the pilot program. We took a couple samples of blood from those pigs, and otherwise they kind of hung out, and everything went smooth. There was also a way for us to get used to everything with 4 pigs, rather before we brought in like 35 pigs. I think the trip you went on, that was the full 35. That was the 3 trucks. I think we had a couple pigs in first just to test, basically just to make sure that we knew what we were doing, where it was easy. Like, you always do this in science. You do a pilot experiment where you keep it real simple to make sure that you kind of know what we're doing before you scale. You don't want like your first day to be 35 pigs and then realize you got a problem.
Right. And that data would mess with your data later too, right? If the first group was us trying to figure out how it's going, then it's not really a proper experiment medically, right? It's more of an experiment of how can we raise pigs. So
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly, right? So I think the next ones there were, we had the pigs in place, and then, that's when I started bringing my initial team down. So we hired in Sarah Ives, and we had a team where we brought down Maurer, Sarah, Casey, and we were all down there to basically launch the project and start injecting the pigs. And then that whole next few months were basically building up the immunity, drawing samples. And at the time, we were flying blind because we were collecting samples, but we didn't have the core experiments we wanted to run. We were trying to go do at the University of San Carlos, but we realized there are certain ones on the tests on the blood that made more sense for us to do in the States. So the facilities just, it didn't really work out for some of the tests. And so, Keith, I think you found the dry ice, right?
Yeah, that was another fun little, I don't know, 180 phone calls on Skype later from my house in Oakland with my now ex-wife going like, can you take those outside, please? Where I eventually found a place with dry ice in Guatemala. I had no idea it'd be so hard to find, but we did find it. And that was used to ship, some of the samples back to the States. That was another process. Good God. There was FedEx, DHL, all these different services I assumed would do it, but they didn't want to. It was just complicated.
It used to be easier, and then because of Ebola, they changed a whole bunch of rules around shipping plasma samples. So we had to get additional approvals from the USDA, and there was only a limited number of shipping companies that would do it. And they're precious. So you realize the whole experiment gets narrowed down to little tubes of serum stored in a box, and you're like, wow, literally that's a year of my life in this box. So if you mess that up, you've lost. And so we made copies, but it still was risky. Right. And with the dry ice, what normally happens when you do this kind of research is you have something called a -80 freezer. So this is a super deep freezer, and they're very expensive, and we didn't have one in Guatemala. But what's nice about them is you're so frozen that it protects samples, where a normal freezer might fluctuate a little bit, and then you have a little bit of thawing and stuff happening on the outside of the tubes when you open and close it, and that risks the samples. You want the samples to be just in deep freeze stasis, like if people in in stasis
type of thing.
Well, yeah, cryogenic freezing, right? So obviously we couldn't get one of those freezers down there, but that's where we innovated, and we're like, you know what, dry ice is -79.5. That's basically -80, and so we ended up taking our solution to a -80 freezer, which is to get I think we would buy 150 pounds at a time, just a shitload of dry ice, and we calculated how long it would take to sublimate dry ice in an ice chest, and that's what we did. We just had huge bricks of dry ice in an ice chest. And that would take a week and a half, so we would just refill it every week and a half, and that basically was our field -80 freezer. That was how we solved that problem.
Yeah, and it worked really well. And actually, on that note, the 150 pounds at a time was the minimum we could buy from that place. They were annoyed that I would get so little. Yeah, they were like, "What? You don't want a bus-sized piece of it?" And I'm like, dude, come on, I'm here with a minivan. Come on, work with me, okay?
Right. But after 180 phone calls, I'm picturing this dynamic if anybody needs anything, they can call the Glanville brothers, right? And then if Jake ain't got a guy, Keith's got a guy, or he can find the guy. You don't have a deep freezer. I might not be able to get -80, but I can get -79.5. I can get pretty close. I love that dynamic of innovation. I'm my little brother was in a building that we're renovating for a hydroponics facility right now. And we had to rip out all these tack strips, right? And they're super full of nails, and they are a pain in the butt to carry around. You've been involved in trades, tack strips.
Sure. Under carpet. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a giant pile of these that we had to get out of this building. And my little brother's sitting there staring at us, picking them up. And this is why I always say the younger siblings you got to watch out for, because they're secretly the smartest ones. They just play it off well. is they're like that he's staring at this pile and I'm picking them up and carrying them out. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Help. And he's like, nah. He grabs a piece of carpet and a ratchet strap, cuts a couple of holes in it, turns it into a backpack, and then puts the tack strips in the backpack and carries it out. And I was like,
That's awesome.
You son of a bitch. I was like, you were just sitting back, like watching me do this. Like, I was like, he's kind of stupid. I'm going to figure out an easier way to do this so that I don't poke my fingers.
Yeah, even if the easier way is sitting there watching you, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you have your entire life now in this box.
Yeah, so this is the crazy. So and this is the kind of the crazy magic moment of this whole thing. So we were flying blind, right? We spent a year on this whole thing. We're setting this thing up in Guatemala. We're handling pigs. It's definitely moments where you look up, you're like, am I just being ridiculous right now? And especially because the people around you, this is back before we had any data. They just think you're doing something weird, right? But like that is the nature of innovation, is that it needs to look weird when you're doing it. Otherwise, it would just be the way. And so we're fucking around doing this, and we couldn't get our shipments in place. And like I said, Guatemalans love paperwork, and I think Ebola made it harder. And so it was just a pain in the ass. We were basically collecting these samples, running this experiment, and we had no idea if we're wasting our time. And there's a lot of ways that things could have gone wrong, right? We could have made mistakes in terms of our vaccine components in the States. We could have had issues on how we ship them down. They could have gone bad in transit. The whole philosophy, the idea, the principle could have been wrong. We could have had problems with our pigs. You know, there's a million things that could have gone wrong. And this is the challenge in science. When something you get a negative, you don't really know, because many things could give rise to a negative, but only a limited number of things could give rise to a positive.
Oh yeah.
And we just didn't know if we're wasting our time. And so finally we came up, we eventually got our approvals in place. We're like, no, we need to send this stuff up. Also, my partners are freaking out. They're like, Dick, you're wasting money. It's a boondoggle. And there was we'd gone down there and I decided it was time to ship the stuff up. And there was like a civil protest in Santiago. I think there was these police officers who, Keith, remember what happened? I think they shot someone at a tienda, and then people got super pissed off and they went and like caught the police station on fire, and they so my groups do this thing called Castigo Maya, which is like when they get really pissed off, they're very patient people, but they have a limit, and then it's like go time. And so they went and like they grabbed the cops. They basically like the town had kidnapped the cops, and then they get super organized. So suddenly it's like the old Mayan civilization. They like knocked down trees on both sides of the town so like no cars could get in, and like
that's hazard.
This whole thing's happening, and I'm like, fuck, I need to get my samples out. So I was like, all right, let's get a boat. And first off, my driver's like, I'm not driving to Santiago, man, because all the guys were like wearing ski masks at the edges, being like, don't go into Santiago. No one's allowed in right now. We're holding the police hostage because we're pissed.
Well, and also they were bringing in basically the police had decided to bring in an assault force from numerous riot/SWAT teams around the area, but it was going to take them a few hours to get there. So that was another reason no drivers wanted to be on the road. They were like, dude, I don't want to get like, stuff happens by accident when, tensions are high. Yeah. The people were burning police cars in the center of town in front of the mayor's office, and tear gas was being launched. I mean, I got a video of me walking around in it.
Yeah.
Anyways, go ahead.
So it was super gnarly. So then I was like, well, let's get a boat. And then, but a bunch of the boat guys weren't even doing it because the mayor tried to escape Santiago, and then they down to a boat, and people grabbed him, and they were like, we're going to like put a tire around you and light you on fire if you don't deal with this. So like, it was like very high tension. Where I'm sitting there being like, I'm running out of dry ice. My whole experiment's going to get fucked. So we managed to call a guy in another town, and he was like, all right, well, I can go straight to your boat dock and get you out of there, but like a special day requires a special price. And I was like, God damn it, dude, just come on, get over here. So like, this guy blazes over. We throw our like ice chest in there. We're blazing out, and like behind, as we're driving across the lake, like there's helicopters flying over, and they're basically basically like national helicopters trying to like reassert control over Guatemala, like Santiago. And it was like fucking gnarly, but we got out, and like, I was like weirdly in a super good mood. I think that's some of the weird things about growing up in chaos, is you kind of love it because you're actually at your best. Like when things are in turmoil, that's when you actually are most useful. And I was like, this is actually a pretty good day, like despite all this ridiculous bullshit. And that's when we got the samples back up to the States. That's its own story. And then that was when Sarah ran her ELISA, and that was like this remarkable day because I was with the ELISA. If a sample had antibodies that responded to the flu hemagglutinin, the sample turns blue. And if it doesn't, it wouldn't turn blue. And so the samples have been randomized. And so if the experiment had failed, or if the whole study had failed, there would be no blue. If the whole thing had turned blue, that means there was a technical problem because we had negative control animals. They shouldn't have all turned blue. So what I was expecting was if the study worked, we'd see polka dots. And so I get a call as I'm driving in, and she's like, Jake, it's polka dots. And everyone's super excited. And we go in and look at it, and it's randomized, but we know there's a bunch of samples that turned super blue and other samples that didn't against a whole bunch of different versions of viruses. And then we run the de-randomization, and the data was absolutely gorgeous. That we end up our animals had these super broad spectrum reactions. The normal pigs did it. And that just suddenly told us that year, that whole effort, Keith's building up that facility, bringing in Karina and her management, the teams that manage the animals, like the vaccine components we brought down, the patents, like it was all worth it in that one moment. And because there's a million ways that things can go wrong, but there's really only one way that it can work. And we hit it. And that literally took us from this like clearing a jungle to build a facility and pigs in Guatemala to like meeting Bill Gates and us getting funded by the Bates Foundation, 3 additional studies, and now our studies being run at with basically NIH supporting institutions. And that was an exciting moment that kind of like pulled the whole thing together.
What's your take on that, Keith?
I just wanted to point out, Jake, the escaping with the samples, that was all you actually. I stayed in Santiago, dude. You took the bull by the horns and were just like, I remember calling you because you were going to try to see if you could get a boat, and then you told me you couldn't. And then yes, the choppers were everywhere, and I'm like going, dude, this is getting worse, dude. There's another cop car on fire. And then I got a text from you and you're like, dude, we managed to get a boat driver from San Pedro, right?
Yeah.
And
that's right.
and yeah, he's all like, yeah, wind in his hair. I can hear him blasting across the lake. And I was like, amen, dude. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I believe I was just starting to get sick. I'd gotten Zika and dengue, actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
oh my God.
Yeah,
you got the double dip.
Yeah. Like you got smacked and then like petted and then punched in the face like right afterwards.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to process right now whether or not like we need to have another Netflix documentary or make a 4th Expendables movie with you guys starring with the cat. Because now that I have this, outside of the fact that like Vin Diesel and The Rock are bald, I'm sure that we could get some awesome cast members to play you guys. Just like Jake holding on to a frozen bottle of tubes, giving the peace sign to a helo as he's bolting down the river to get out. And like, I think it's so I'm gonna kind of make this come full circle here, right? Like we started out in childhood being pragmatic, having to be problem solvers, sneaking out on a boat, and ending being pragmatic, being problem solvers in way more intense situations, collaborating, getting the fuck out of there on a boat. But the entire mission, and Jake brought it up a couple of different times, is, you know, there's a lot of ways that things can go wrong, but really only one that can make it go right. And when you're that innovator and you're in that place, you know, you grew up without the blessing, like you guys said, the blessing of growing up, not having everything handed and having to figure things out and having to problem solve, just builds those synaptical connections as a child. You know, that is the time that your brain builds what it's capable of for the rest of its life. And being in situations where you have to make do, you know, there's people that are like, oh, I can't get a freezer. That sucks. Looks like I can't get the experiment. Or you could be, oh, I can't get a freezer, but I can get dry ice and I can make it work. You know, you should be able to take a Swiss Army knife in a mud pit and survive. Yeah. And that's exactly the way that you guys run business, and why I love working with Cenevax, because when it comes down to the wire, it's adapt or die, you know, and that is what really drives innovation and what makes companies successful. And all of this experimentation and getting to that point where you're seeing the polka dot ELISAs is just a phenomenal feeling of accomplishment, you know, leading to these points now where you can say, you know, Keith can say, hey, man, you know, you wouldn't have met Bill Gates without me setting up that camp, bro. I'm just saying, you know, I shoveled a lot of crap, you know, setting up that stuff. But that relationship, it has to be an amazing thing to be able to look back on and proudly, you know, talk about together.
It is. I was incredibly honored and incredibly blessed to be part of something like this.
I feel the same, and I'm just lucky to have Keith as my brother. We wouldn't have gotten here without it.
Yeah. No, I really feel like, you know, I kind of want to make this end just by traditionally I've given the floor to the guests, right? And I've been privileged enough to lead this interview. And I really feel like I had the ability to kind of get a glimpse behind the scenes, and everybody hopefully that's watching this right now feels like they know you a little bit better. But if there's anything, that you want to tell the audience, both, we can start with Keith and we'll wrap it up with Jake as the final word. But if there's anything that the audience should know about or something that you would want to tell them that's kind of on your heart after being through this interview process, Keith, is there anything that you would want to say to the audience?
I think I already said it. I mean, Jake, I just want to say thanks for having so much faith in me, and it really helped me get around some maybe lack of faith in myself for years. The freedom you gave me to take care of that, and the faith that I would do it right, even if it was a small part in the beginning, really helped me to do better in my life later on. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think you deserve more credit. I think that's a low bar. I think that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. I think I had that idea, and that idea would have been like a million stupid ideas that never gets to take loft, except that you were able to take that cloud castle and build a foundation under it. So I just want to say thank you for that. Like we became possible because we were able to be brothers, and I knew you could solve any problem in front of you, and this was going to be hard. And it's always hardest in the beginning, right? Things get, people always come and join the snowball once it rolls, but it's that first little part, getting it rolling, that really kind of makes stuff happen. And you were a catalyst in making that happen. So I just want to say thank you.
Dude, it was fun. I mean, it was an adventure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
the adventure shall continue. So speaking of which, you're coming up this weekend, right? So I get to see you a little bit?
Yeah.
All right, loves.
Going to come up this afternoon or tomorrow. Yeah.
Nice. All right, we'll mask up and hang out.
Sounds good.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in today. Hopefully you got a really good, in-depth background on who both of these gentlemen are. Jake, Keith, it's been an honor. I appreciate you guys taking the time. And until next time, everybody, again, I'm Jan Almasy, the guy behind the curtain here. And we will touch base with you the next time Cenevax has an update for everybody.
Thank you, Jan.
Thanks, Jan.